Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Unfortunately, today is not a good day for Ukraine. If you haven't already heard, the Russians have decided to blow up the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. This is a power plant that provided electricity for millions of Ukrainians, and the Russians have chose to plunge them all into darkness. The Russians did this with no warning, knowing that the flooding would wash away thousands of people's homes. Over 100 settlements across Ukraine are currently flooded, and the flooding is going to get worse over the coming days. So here on the map is where the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant is, and it holds back all of this water up here. This is the reservoir for the Dnipro River. If we zoom in, the area that's going to be experiencing the flooding is down here. Google Maps has already updated, stating that the Kakhovka Dam has collapsed. But if you just turn on satellite images, I can show you all of the homes and settlements of Ukrainians living in the Russian-occupied territories. This is territory that Russia currently controls. And all of these homes are going to be destroyed. They're all going to be washed away. The humanitarian crisis currently being experienced is difficult to describe. So on the ground in the city of Kherson, this is Alexei Goncharenko. He's a member of the Ukrainian parliament representing Odessa, and I want to share his report from this morning.
Hello to everybody. I'm now in the center of Kherson. Here is the Park of Glory and the monument to the victory over Nazism. But again, this land suffers from new Nazis, from Russian Nazis. And here you see Dnieper River. You see the speed of the flood of the water, how quickly it's moving. And already, just take a look, by the way, this is sad danger mines. You see the sign, and you can see how water is coming up very quickly, already several meters higher, probably maybe 3 meters higher, and we are quite far away from the dam, near 100 kilometers, but you can see how quickly the water is coming up. Also, there is a smell of engine oil, because at least 150 tons of engine oil from the dam are now in the river, and maybe 300 more tons will be. That's a huge ecological catastrophe. The consequences will be for decades. But Russia, they don't care. Their tactics in Ukraine and in general their tactics of warfare is scorched earth. They announced this land to be theirs, but they are destroying this land. Awful consequences also can be for Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is the third biggest in the world and the biggest in Europe, because now the level of water in reservoir around the nuclear power plant dropped down because the water is not stopped anymore by the dam, and that also can cause very big threats to nuclear security. So you see what is Russia and what they're doing. One more crime, and according to Geneva Convention, to destroy such a dam it equals with the mass destruction weaponry usage, like a nuclear weaponry usage or chemical or biological. Just imagine. From Kherson, especially for you, Alexei Goncharenko.
To destroy a hydroelectric power plant under international law, this is clearly a war crime. Article 56 of Protocol 1 of 1977 to the Geneva Convention states, dams, dikes, and nuclear electrical generation stations shall not be made the object of attack, if such attack may cause the release of dangerous forces and consequent severe losses among the civilian population. The destruction of this dam is a weapon of mass destruction, intended by the Russians to inflict maximum casualties and suffering on the civilian population. And President Zelensky warned the world, this article is from October 21st, when it was looking like the Russians were going to lose the city of Kherson, they mined the dam. They also mined the electrical power plants. The intelligence was given. I even think there were photographs leaked. But the Russians have had explosives inside this dam for over 6 months, willing to destroy it and blow it up should they feel like they're about to lose more territory in Kherson. And of course, the Russians are saying they didn't do it and the Ukrainians did it. But that's not what witnesses on the scene are saying. Ukrainians on both sides of the river are stating no missiles were heard, no artillery was heard. The dam blew up from an explosion on the inside. And here's a statement from President Zelensky. Russia has been controlling the dam and the entire hydroelectric power plant for more than a year. It is physically impossible to blow it up somehow from the outside by shelling. It was mined by the Russian occupiers and they blew it up. And for outside observers, this seems obvious. Let me share with you the thoughts of Peter Zion. You cannot blow a dam up with artillery. You have to use an explosive on the inside. This was definitely done by the Russians. Here are the biggest outcomes that Peter Zion can think of. The dam is one of the very few ways to cross the Dnieper River. The Russians clearly want to make it as difficult as possible to cross this river. There was also a navigation lock here. It is now impossible to navigate the lower river. So there was a canal lock that allowed boats to go upstream and downstream, and because the dam is blown, this canal lock is now worthless. Ships can no longer navigate up the river or down the river. Within 4 days, the water level will drop below the level that the Crimean Canal can function. This is the canal that feeds fresh water to Crimea. And within a couple days, water will no longer flow through this canal to Crimea. The Russians did this to themselves. Feels like a if we can't have it, no one can have it moment. And to top it all off, there's a very real concern now for the stability of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's been running at minimum capacity to avoid a meltdown. Now they are going to have to get creative about cooling water. So I do think one of the messages that the Russians wanted to send by blowing up this hydroelectric power plant is we can do this again, because the intelligence is there that Russia has also mined the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So this is the cooling pond where water is held to cool the nuclear reactors. They draw this water from the Dnieper River. This water level is going to fall. I don't know how this is going to affect the coolant pond for the nuclear power plant. But the message that Russia wants to send to the world is, we're prepared to kill everyone. By blowing up this hydroelectric power plant, they're signaling that the nuclear power plant could be next if they lose this territory. And I cannot understate how catastrophic this would be. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is the third largest in the world, the largest in Europe, and if Russia were to blow it up, the radioactive debris would get into the Dnieper River. This would flow into the Black Sea. The Black Sea would then flow into the Mediterranean Sea. Over the course of months, enough radioactive material would flow into the Mediterranean Sea to nearly kill every living organism in the Mediterranean. So I cannot understate this. I cannot stress this enough. For the peoples living in the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe, you need to wake up. You need to do something about the Russians. Because if they detonate the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants, like they just did to the hydroelectric power plant, this is a global extinction level event. We're going to have mass birth defects for generations to come. I don't know how long it would take for the Mediterranean Sea to recover from this event should Russia blow up the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And as far as detonating the dam, this is something the Russians have done before. On August 18th, 1941, the Russians used 20 tons of explosives to blow up the old Dnipro hydroelectric dam. They did this hoping that this would slow down or stop the German offensive in 1941. The Russians killed between 20,000 and 100,000 Ukrainian civilians by blowing up the dam without giving them notice. So the Russians have a historical precedent for blowing up dams and killing Ukrainian civilians. They don't care how many Ukrainians they kill. And to give you a human story, I want to share this video from Olia Hercules. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly. She's from southern Ukraine and operates a cooking channel here on YouTube. But I just want to share with you her reaction to the news.
Good morning. I haven't done a video like this for a while, and I really was hoping that I would need to. But they blew up the dam in New Kakhovka. Not a lot of people know how much suffering and ecological upheaval they've caused when they built it in the 1950s. So it was part of Stalin's plan for transformation of nature, because, subjugating people wasn't enough. They had to subjugate nature as well. So they built all these dams. They created the reservoir, which caused so many villages. They flooded so many villages in the 50s. About 30,000 people had to be evacuated and given only 3 days to evacuate in the 50s when they built the dam and created the reservoir. The beautiful Dnipro floodplains were flooded. The ecological system was broken. And today, they, with no warning to people, to anyone, they just blew it up, creating another ecological disaster, another human disaster. And my heart is broken. How can they hate life so much? And today, I guess, apart from urging everyone to keep supporting us, I appeal to all of the eco warriors of the world, because I feel like there hasn't been said enough. There hasn't been enough support from you. Please. They are ecological terrorists. They're terrorists in every sense of the word. Right now, cattle are being drowned. People, of course, are losing their homes. But there is irreversible damage happening to everywhere. I can't even explain how much, what is happening there. It's horrible.
So let me share with you some sad stories of what Ukrainians are going through right now. Once again, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people's homes are going to be destroyed and washed away. Survivors can see their homes floating down the river. Hearing the voice of my friend's mother from Kherson as she cries and says, "My parents' graves are currently being washed away." For animals, they don't know what to do. They don't understand what is happening. Lots of Ukrainian civilians are doing what they can to save and rescue animals. But for larger livestock, such as cows, there's nothing you can do. You can't save them. They're all going to drown. They're not going to be able to be put into a small boat like a dog can. There's also a zoo in the area that had over 300 animals. It's been flooded, and except for the ducks and geese, none of the animals survived. This clip on the bottom is the zoo before Russian occupation. This clip on top is a zookeeper helpless to save these animals. And while Ukrainians are doing everything they can to help people, the Russian military continues to fire on them.
Катастрофа, конечно, конкретная. Люди! Люди! Где собаки есть у тебя? Ебать. Летит. Нет. Не готов. Давай, братан, греби, там люди.
So what's the Russians' response? Of course, they said they didn't do it, but here's a clip put out this morning by Vladimir Soldo, a pro-Russian collaborator and the head of the annexed Kherson region. And he put out a video saying everything's fine.
Город Новая Каховка и все города, которые находятся ниже по течению, это и Олежки, это и Олия пристань, это и сам Херсон, и другие населенные пункты, живут. Люди спокойно двигаются по улицам. Только что проезжал по улицам, люди спокойно работают автозаправки, работают некоторые магазины, работают даже предприятия.
So this idiot stands in front of a window in which his city has been flooded, and he states, people are calmly moving on the streets. I just drove on the streets. The gas stations are working. Some stores are even working. So big picture, once again, why did Russia do this? And yes, everyone knows about the canal that feeds fresh water to Crimea, but there's an extensive canal network that feeds fresh water to farmers all across the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. You can see this canal brings fresh water all the way to the city of Melitopol. So the Russians know they're about to get their asses kicked, and they're going to lose all of this territory. They've already drawn up the plans to retreat all their forces back to Crimea. They've built the defense lines. They've already mined everything. They're expecting to lose this territory. So by blowing up the dam and lowering the water levels, they're making all of these canals worthless so that the people in this region can't get fresh water, they can't carry on agricultural activity, and they won't have electricity. That is what Russia just did by blowing up this dam. And this counteroffensive can't come soon enough. It doesn't matter if they had launched the counteroffensive weeks ago, months ago, whatever. Russia had already made up their minds they were going to blow up this dam. If Ukraine had launched it 4 months ago, the Russians would have blown up this dam. Early stages of Ukraine's counteroffensive appear to be underway. Ukraine's long-promised counteroffensive seems to have kicked off with probing actions in Donetsk and the Zaporizhzhia regions. So Ukraine's Ministry of Defense put out this video, I'll link it down below, just asking for people to, be quiet about the activities of the Ukrainian military. So I'm a war commentator, I make posts for social media. What can and what can I not talk about? So definitely nobody should be sharing pictures and videos of troop locations, troop concentrations, any kind of demining activity or sensitive military equipment such as jamming stations, air defense systems. I never do that anyways. Mostly what I share on my channel is information coming from the Russians. So the Russians already know it. It's important for Ukrainians on the ground in these areas to not share pictures and videos of Ukrainian soldiers moving or taking action. So I'm not going to do that. As far as map updates, the map providers such as deepstatemap.live, they've all agreed with the Ukrainian government not to post mapped updates for at least 48 hours. So I'll do my best to share stories and give you information, but I'm not going to do anything that I feel like would compromise the activities of the Ukrainian military. So let's talk about the Russians, because they're completely ridiculous. This is the Russian Ministry of Defense stating yesterday that they destroyed 8 Leopard 2 tanks and killed 1,500 Ukrainian soldiers. And normally this would be absurd, but this video is extra special. And they provided the video footage from a Russian attack helicopter showing their destruction of a Leopard 2 tank. And I'm just going to ask you, does anything look unusual about that Leopard 2 tank? Why is it just parked in that empty farm field? And it's obvious that these are harvesting machines. These belong to Ukrainian farmers. So the Russian military blew up a bunch of harvesting equipment and then patted themselves on the back, claiming they destroyed some Leopard 2 tanks. So here's a handy-dandy guide for the Russian Ministry of Defense. What exactly is a Leopard 2 when you destroy it? That's definitely a Leopard 2. Yep, definitely Leopard 2. These are definitely going to count as Leopard 2s. And if they destroy one of these, that's obviously an M1 Abrams tank. So let's check in on the People's Republic of Belgorod. Russia urges border district to evacuate amid Ukraine shelling. So the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps, they crossed the border into Belgorod on June 1st. And it's 6 days later, and they're still there. The Russian military doesn't know how to defeat them. The Russian military doesn't know how to get them to withdraw back into Ukraine. So the Russian Volunteer Corps put out this video yesterday. Let me go ahead and read it for you. Fighters of the Russian Volunteer Corps have been in control of the village of Novaya Tavalanska for a long time. I would like to remind all Russian citizens that this is not a small abandoned village, but a settlement where 5,000 people live. Now it is empty. There are only fighters of the Russian Volunteer Corps here. There is no other power in this region. If Mr. Gladkov cannot control his territory, we will talk only to his superiors who are in Moscow. I think Mr. Gladkov is the governor for the Belgorod region, so the Russian Volunteer Corps is just trolling him. So when we switch to the map, here's the city of Belgorod, here's the city of Kharkiv. The Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps, they crossed over here and immediately seized this village of about 5,000 people. I think their goal was to capture Shebekino. Shebekino is about 40,000 people, so it's significantly larger. But I don't know how many Russian partisans crossed the border. Estimates that I've heard are it's only about 500 guys, so for 500 guys to take a town of 40,000 people, that would be pretty impressive, but it sounds like they haven't quite done it. And the regular Russian military arrived in Shebekino and immediately started destroying the city, indiscriminately firing on civilian buildings anywhere they thought the Russian partisans might be located. In the chaos and confusion, both locals and members of the regular Russian military have started looting the town. Now, why would members of the regular Russian military do this? And it's because they're probably not from this region. I imagine for an impoverished, conscripted man from Siberia, going to the area of Belgorod probably looks pretty fancy. I imagine the Russian citizens living in this area, significantly are wealthier than poor conscripts from Siberia. So the town is being destroyed, it's being looted, there's lawlessness, civilians have been putting out videos asking for help, but the Russian government can't do anything to get the situation under control. And don't take my word for it. Let me share this clip with you of a Russian conscript describing how bad the situation is in Belgorod. This is a video that was translated by Igor with Wind of Change. Dear friends, I am an ordinary soldier in the Russian Armed Forces. My name is Vladimir with the 138th Brigade Infantry. Until yesterday, we were on the border with Ukraine in the Belgorod region. We came under the most powerful artillery shelling of our positions, including those effing HIMARS. I guarantee that Ukraine is not using HIMARS on Russian territory. It was a different artillery system, but all these guys are terrified of HIMARS, so everything is a HIMARS to them. We received an order to hold position, which we did. A few hours after this, Ukrainians, a effing ton of Ukrainians. This guy thinks he's fighting Ukrainians when in fact he's fighting the Russian partisans. We fired back and tried to repel them, but there were too many of them. We requested permission to retreat, but were denied. As a result, we lost around 80% of our personnel and were forced to retreat without permission and without reinforcements. We left the border after some time. The same situation occurred with two other groups. They mowed down an entire regiment of our men. We are aware that our command knew everything in advance about the offense on our positions. What were you guys waiting for? Orders from above? But that we told you we would all die here didn't seem to bother you. Colonel Klochkin, the blame for the death of our guys lays personally on you. You will not be able to wash off the blood from your hands to the end of your life, you effing pisser. Because of you, we lost a large contingent of our personnel, lost a piece of the border, lost supplies, and a ton of our people have now surrendered. You scum sat in your offices and waited. Now you yourselves will have to regain these positions, but now from the trenches, not from behind a desk. That's it from me. Thank you for your attention. So that's a report on the ground from an ordinary Russian soldier. So here is a post from a Russian military blogger, and for people who support Russia on English-speaking media, they don't pay attention to what the Russians are saying. You know, Scott Ritter and Colonel McDouglas or whatever, they just keep repeating their talking points, ignoring all available evidence from what the Russians are actually saying and doing. So here is a post from a Russian military blogger. I'm sitting in effing shock. The situation in the country is effed up. They're only destabilizing it further. The situation in Belgorod is getting worse. The Ministry of Defense almost entered into an open confrontation with Wagner. Wagner had a confrontation with the Chechens. They don't let us work at full strength on the waiting lists. Drones fly over Moscow. They fly over Krasnodar, systematically hitting Crimea. Everyone fights with each other, even on Telegram channels. How are we going to win like this? Nothing distinguishes Russia from other countries as much as competition and hostility of various structures to each other. The problem is deeper and deeper. People argue with each other in grocery stores. Military argue in their locations. There is arguing between the types of military forces, arguing between structures. Everyone in Russia effing argues. Oh yeah, did I mention that the Wagner Group published a video of a captured Russian lieutenant colonel? The dispute between the head of the Wagner PMC and the Russian Defense Ministry moves to a new level of absurdity as Prigozhin claims to have made a colonel a prisoner of war. So here's the video. I'm not going to play it. I'll link it down below if you want to watch it for yourself. But this is a Russian lieutenant colonel, Roman Venvitin, commander of the 72nd Brigade. And apparently, while drunk, he fired on Wagner soldiers. There were casualties. The Wagner soldiers fought back. Casualties on the Russian Ministry of Defense side. And they took him prisoner and tortured him, and then forced him to give a confession. This is not some peasant from Siberia who was conscripted. This guy is a career military man and an officer, being completely humiliated and taken prisoner by the Wagner Group. Videos like this go way beyond the actual incident. It not only shows that the Wagner mercenaries and the regular Russian military are at each other's throats, but it also sends a message to every Russian soldier not to mess with the Wagner Group, especially the Russian General Staff. Prigozhin and his private army are feeling untouchable, and that instances like this prove that Bakhmut was a PR stunt. Bakhmut had zero military value for the Wagner Group. Prigozhin did it to elevate his own prestige. The Wagner Group doesn't fly the Russian tricolor flag. They fly the flag of the Wagner Group. So Prigozhin will eventually move against his real target, Putin and the Kremlin. He prepared the ground since months or even years ago. He is after Putin's throne, but he is clever enough to target the weaklings in Putin's inner circle first, like Gerasimov and Shoigu. Russian Civil War. It's coming. So what is the reaction of the Kremlin's propagandists? What are they saying on Kremlin State TV? Let me share this clip with you.
Да, вот он героический какой-то. Если
I think Kremlin State TV might be broken. They might want to try turning it off and then turning it back on. Normally I end these videos with feel-good clips. I had two ready to go for you guys, but it didn't feel appropriate. So to end this video, I want to share a clip of a Ukrainian first responder doing his best to save as many lives as possible.
Так, ну что, все, братик, забрали. Сидите? Сидим. Возьми два. Давай, два. Все. А кому паспорт?
That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support this channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.